Taking a step back, just gonna look at what's left. Lots of detailing and texture to do, but we'll get this staff in there and then should be ready to really finish this off. So I'm gonna make a new layer actually for the staff so I can draw some straight lines and move some stuff around. If you're working on paper, just practice on a separate sheet. Kind of throwing in a weird wood texture, like a sorcerer's staff. Again, that's up to you depending on what kind of material you want a specific item to be made out of. And I'm just winging this snake face, but hopefully you still have the reference that we pulled from earlier if you're having trouble. Again, this is something you might want to rough out a little bit further than we may have if you're having trouble with it. Pretty happy with mine though. Now that we're finishing off this final piece, kind of leads us into the part that I've been excited for, which is texturing and the fine details, everything else really. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off our rough layer. So we should be left with all these final lines, and I'm going to merge my snake staff with that final lines layer just to keep everything clean and organized for the time being. And I'm going to get a new layer just so I don't mess anything up. So, line weight. One of my favorite parts of the drawing. So you can see right now everything has the same line weight. It's all 0.9 and doesn't really have a whole lot of depth because of that. I like to think of line weight as a magic trick, and it can bring stuff forward. So if Spider-Man was punching at you and his fist was in front of everything else in that panel, that would be the closest thing to you, and so it would have the thickest line. There isn't a whole lot of depth in this character anyway, because he's just kind of standing there, but adding a thicker line to the lower part of each of these different pieces of fabric, you can see why I call it a magic trick, because suddenly it really sells the idea that those are lying on top of each other. Just pretty cool. So go around the whole drawing and kind of find the parts that you think should pop out. Like this tattered edge is obviously in front of the snake body. So by adding a little bit of a thicker line, you can really sell that. It's magic. Good instance of depth right here because that tail kind of fades back. So you don't want to bring your thick line all the way to the end of it. Just kind of fade it out. And that should make the tail appear to fall into the distance a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to get the line right. So what else needs to be brought forward? We're going to be able to add a lot of depth too when we get into some of the shadows and stuff right before we color. So don't feel like you have to increase the thickness of every single line. Just the ones that kind of call to you. You'll get a better idea of which ones those are the more that you do it. You can see these snakes are laid on top of each other, but this forefinger one is out in front, so he's going to have the thickest line. Same with the thumb. Might seem like a strange step, or like it's not making a huge difference, but you can really tell when you back out. It's pretty cool. I'm going to create a new layer where I can get into more of the texturing and kind of comic book shading, cross-hatching, all those finer details. And that way I don't have to worry about messing up my line weight or my initial lines there. See everything we added. So I'm just adding some finer details here, some trim on the trim. And we talked earlier about how I was going to fill that with some kind of cool design work. So that's where that's going to go inside of these. So I'm working on the Wacom Cintiq, and it's really awesome for pressure sensitivity. I've got my brush turned down as well so that it's not as big of a brush as when we were doing the line weight. So that helps. You can only get it so thick depending on how hard you press. But it's really helpful when you're trying to get things to come to a nice point like I was on the edges of these. So if I pull up, that's what's actually causing that cool point there rather than if I just let go. And that's all from just the awesome pressure sensitivity. It's a lot like what you'd find in a regular old brush if you're working on paper, which is the whole idea. I like to work digitally on stuff that I know is going to take a lot of revisions and have a lot of changes, because as you can see, it's easy to just hit step backward or undo. Plus, when we get to color, you'll see how often I change my mind about things and can quickly change the color or the mood of the piece just by dropping in some new shade of something. Otherwise, I often actually make all my comic books with a mechanical pencil on real paper because I just like it. I haven't completely made the leap, and I probably never will, to all digital. Kind of revisiting a few lines I think should be a little bit thicker, but maybe not as thick as our thickest lines. So just step back every now and then, take a look at what's there and see if there's anything you want to add. Adding in more little kind of age marks and ticks into the costume, which kind of just gives it a scratchier, more weathered look. I'm going to do that a lot down here on all the tattered pieces. So that looks like they've been through some stuff. These little details just, I feel like, add a lot. Same with the skin. This guy's an ancient vampire, so his skin is probably pretty gross looking. So I'm going to make that kind of the same leathery type of look. Maybe throw some warts and boils on him just to show how gross he is. And then lastly, as far as that goes, get some more on the face. Maybe he's got some scars. He is an ancient warlord, sorcerer. I'm going to fill his mouth as well with just black. And I'm going to take my eraser, kind of cut into that, maybe in a few spots. Show that he's got teeth behind teeth, like a shark. Pretty nasty. And finally, onto the crosshatch pattern that I've been looking forward to and also dreading inside of the trim. This will take a while, but it'll be worth it. Doing it on a whole new layer. If you're working on pencil and paper, you just gotta be careful and try and stay within the lines. And I'm just kind of going one direction, the other direction, other direction. Just keep on going with this until you go insane or it's finished, whichever comes first. I'm going to keep going and show you what this looks like when it's all said and done. Comics are pretty hard work and very time consuming, but the devil is in the details.